In tonight's Spotlight, Ralph Nader and other liberal leaders are looking for a slate of 6 Democrats to challenge President Obama in a primary. In a letter to elected officials, civic leaders, and academics in the progressive community, Nader and the other signatories argue a Democratic primary challenge, quote, would allow for robust and exciting discussion and debate during the primary season while posing little risk to the president other than to encourage him to take more progressive stands. Certainly, President Obama will not be pleased to face a list of primary challengers, but the comfort of the incumbent is far less important than the vitality and strength of his party's progressive ideas and ideals. President Obama should emerge from the primary a stronger candidate as a result. In reaction to Nader's new idea, former Democratic Senator Russ Feingold said, I strongly disagree with Ralph Nader. As I've said many times before, I believe that re-electing President Obama is an absolute imperative for our economy, our judicial system, for progressives, and for our country. Joining me now, 5-time presidential candidate and consumer advocate Ralph Nader. Thank you very much for joining me tonight, Ralph.
Thank you.
Ralph, why aren't you running yourself, and why do you want a slate of 6 challengers to the president?
Well, first, it's a two-party dictatorship. Third parties really don't have much of a chance. They get blacked out from the presidential debates, blacked out by the media. I ran 3 times officially and have documented in many ways with litigation and articles and books by others that we've got to have electoral reform, have a more competitive democracy, and give more choice to the voters. As far as the slate's concerned, a slate by definition is not a challenge to his nomination. It's a challenge to his conscience, a challenge to his backbone. It's a challenge to have the Democratic primaries be other than a series of Air Force trips around the country where President Obama is responding to the crazed plutocratic Republicans and their juvenile monetized minds. It's an attempt to basically broaden the issues in the election for all the millions of workers who are stuck in a stagnant minimum wage, for the millions of workers who want to form trade unions against globalization and they're not allowed to, for cracking down on corporate crime and the corporate crime wave with adequate budget, for stopping illegal wars overseas, for having single-payer health insurance, another majoritarian position. There are all kinds of environmental issues, public reform, civil rights, all kinds of issues which are never going to be discussed. They'll be completely off the table, blacked out in a one-man primary. And if something is not discussed, as Patrick Moynihan, our common friend, once said, if you don't discuss something, you can't ever expect it to be advanced. In other words, the entire liberal progressive agenda will be off the table. They won't be on C-SPAN. They won't be on the media. They won't be interacting with people at the grassroots. For what reason? For what reason? The liberal intelligentsia has got to introspect more. They're pretty comfortable. They have good jobs, good pensions, good health insurance. They don't speak for tens of millions of Americans who want these gripping issues of the corporate domination of our country, the corporate domination of our government, the corporate state that Franklin Delano Roosevelt called fascism in a formal address to the Congress in 1938. They want to discuss whether the people are going to be in charge or whether the corporations are going to continue to run this country into the ground and ship its jobs and industries to fascist and communist dictatorships overseas who know how to keep their 80 cents an hour workers in their place.
Ralph, your letter is quite long. I've read it in its entirety, and your list of signatories is also long. It includes Jonathan Kozol, Cornel West, former Senator Aberesk, and many others. And in the letter, in the details of it, it's very clear that you are not trying to unseat President Obama. There are many passages in there that assure that, of course, he will be renominated. But I want to read to you some of the questions we got today from Twitter where people are asking me to ask you these questions. Here's one from Talkie Toaster 2. He said, ask Nader when he will stop helping get Republicans elected. Ralph, that's what people think you're doing.
They ought to think a little deeper. Nobody has criticized more profoundly in detail across 50 states the Republican Party's indentured status to corporatism. It's repudiation of some of its best conservative instincts going back many years, which now we would call progressive positions in some areas, and supporting progressive candidates around the country. You see, Twitter, by definition, means you don't think beyond 140-some characters. We got to start getting serious in this country. We got to start having fundamental elections on fundamental issues of power. We got to talk about a speculation tax on Wall Street, which can raise $300 billion on speculation instead of burdening working folks with the taxes. We got to talk about a carbon tax. We got to talk about climate change. We got to talk about reorganizing the labor force so it has a collective voice instead of being split asunder and abandoned by corporations born in the USA, profited on the backs of American workers, going to Washington and bailed out by American taxpayers, saved by the U.S. Marines when they get in trouble overseas. And what's their response to the American worker? Is it gratitude? No. It's, we're getting the hell out of here with your jobs and industries to these communist and fascist regimes. We want the issues of shift of power, of democratic resurgence, small d, before the people of this country, and break up that debate commission, which is nothing but a corporation created by the two parties to make sure that other voices are not heard. I don't understand why it's even controversial. It's just fundamental free speech and action. And we've got to push this very hard, Lawrence, because otherwise, all next year, you will never hear all the major issues that liberals and progressives believe in, and many of them are majoritarian issues, which I've mentioned. You will never get on C-SPAN anything but the Republican line with Obama being defensively responding to him, as he has been for 3 years. In other words, they, with their corporate masters, pull Obama to their side. And who's going to pull Obama? To the majority of the American people, the working family side.
Ralph, we've got to go, and we are going to hear about those issues on this program in the next year, and we're going to have you back to talk about them some more. But I want you to take a look tonight, if you get a chance, if someone can show them to you. Some of these questions that came in on Twitter, some of them are pretty good for that 140-character limit.
I will, but
in fact,
I wish
they're
people,
very good.
I wish people would log into singlepayeraction.org and read the full letter and then feed back to the email.
Okay. Ralph, thank you very, very much for joining me tonight.
Thank you so much, Laura.